The Blood Star. There are quite a few status effects in Elden Ring: poison, deathblight, madness, rot, sleep, frostbite, and finally, blood loss. As one of the most powerful effects in the game, players may want to consider using a weapon or spell that inflicts bleed damage. These are mostly limited to what you would expect to leave deep wounds, like certain blades or spiked weapons, along with spells that come from Mohg, the Lord of Blood. But there's one other category that only includes a handful of items. The Blood Star, discovered by the guilty, grants the power of the bloody thorns that are known as the Briars of Sin. While there are very few items that directly mention the Blood Star, some hints hidden throughout the game can help show how important this concept really is. I think you might be surprised at what all can be learned about this, but keep in mind that there will be spoilers ahead. For most players, their first encounter with the Blood Star will be in the Round Table Hold. Dropping to the lower level will cause Mad Tongue Alberic to invade us, and he uses a scythe and sorceries that inflict frostbite, along with spells that summon swarms of blood-red thorns. He doesn't drop his weapons or armor on defeat, but his set can be found at the other version of the Round Table in Leyndell, the royal capital. His hat, robe, and bracers are set with red glintstones said to be formed by the blood of sacrifices. Glintstone is normally a greenish-blue color, and it usually serves as a conduit for casting the glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria. We can see this glintstone scattered throughout Liurnia and being mined in crystal caves, so while traditional glintstone is more like a naturally formed mineral associated with the cosmos, red glintstone instead requires sacrificial blood in order to be formed. Alberic's red glintstones, which strengthen thorn sorceries, are likely why he is called a heretical practitioner. These are also known as aberrant sorceries, which include the Briars of Sin and the Briars of Punishment. The first of these spells can be found in Eastern Liurnia from a lone Thorn Fire sorcerer. It drops the Briars of Sin sorcery, which reads, "An aberrant sorcery discovered along with red glintstone by those exiled to the north for their crimes. Summons large thorns from a whirl of blood shed by one's own hand in penance for sins. The Academy reviles this sorcery, which draws its power from faith." These thorn sorcerers can also be found in every camp of the fire monks, who are the guardians of the Flame of Ruin. In these camps, we see these huge thorny structures that kind of look like swords plunged into the ground. They somewhat resemble the thorn sorcerer's staff of the guilty, which is described as a smoldering, withered sapling that turns the blood of sacrifices pierced by it into glintstone. The other aberrant sorcery, the Briars of Punishment, can be found in the Mountaintops of the Giants. It explains that the guilty, whose eyes were gouged by thorns, lived in eternal darkness. There, they discovered the Blood Star. Elden Ring has a lot of recurring themes, and one of them is the significance of sight, or in this case, the lack of sight. Blindness is repeatedly used to show how you don't need working eyes to see the truth, like how the beasts follow the path set before them with their eyes covered by their armor. The exiled prophets walk the path leading to the future after having their eyes gouged out, and the blind maiden Hyetta can seek the light of the frenzied flame by consuming the eyeballs of those afflicted with madness. But these Thornfire sorcerers are not the only enemies that utilize the Briars. The Fire Prelates, who lead the Fire Monks, wield whips and hammers that both resemble the bloody thorns. The Thorned Whip's description calls it a device of fearsome religious encouragement, fashioned in the image of the Briars of Sin. I think we can pretty safely assume that the Thorn Sorcerers cooperate with the Fire Monks, since they're usually found in the same areas. The Fire Monks seem to have been appointed to watch over the Giant's flame to prevent the use of it against the Erd Tree. After the war against the Giants, Queen Marika cursed the Fire Giant to tend this flame for eternity, so the monks and fire sorcerers were likely also chosen as guardians. Though there is some evidence that the Thorn Fire Sorcerers actually participated in this war. Remember the thorny structures from before? These same growths can be seen piercing every single corpse of the giants in the mountaintops. Of course, we could say that the bodies were pierced after their deaths, possibly to seal away the power of their god, but the conclusion that makes the most sense to me is that the Thorn Sorcerers, and maybe the Fire Monks by extension, played a part in the death of the giants. Though, why would Godfrey, who led the war against the giants, employ the help of exiled criminals? It may seem unlikely, especially since we're never told this directly, but let's consider another war that Godfrey's forces were a part of, the war against the ancient dragons. The Crucible Knights were once loyal to Godfrey, and if we look at Farum Azula, where this war seems to have been fought, we can see some of these knights were left behind. As time went on, the Crucible Knights became seen as chaotic and deserving of scorn. Additionally, the heroes of Zamor, who wielded ice magic and also helped defeat the giants, seem to have been subjected to some sort of imprisonment. One of them is found in an Everjail, and they all have metal shackles on their wrists. Maybe the exiled, criminal thorn sorcerers can be included in this trend of Godfrey's forces that were later shunned. I've seen other explanations for these thorn-like structures as well, as the Briars of Sin aren't the only source of thorns in the lands between. Some items from Stormvale Castle are covered in thorns, which we know comes from the corpse of Godwyn, the half-dead demigod. Coming into contact with Godwyn's deathblight causes the victim to be pierced by the thorns of death. Another notable user of thorns is Elemer of the Briar. This character comes from a foreign land and is also known as the Bell-Bearing Hunter. He was convicted of murdering merchants for their bell bearings, but he escaped his execution, and the rusted iron briars that cover his armor are the mark of the guilty and typically indicate a sentence of death. These briars initially sound like they might be what also blinded the eyes of the thorn sorcerers, since both of these types of thorns are associated with criminals, but if we look at the thorns still on the faces of the sorcerers, it looks like their eyes were instead blinded by a wooden crown of thorns. I think this is meant to enforce one of the biggest themes found in this game. As I'm sure many players have noticed, there's a few references to the biblical character of Jesus Christ in Elden Ring. For those who don't know, Jesus was crucified on a wooden cross under the accusation of blasphemy. One of the most notable aspects of his crucifixion is the crown of thorns that was placed on his head as a form of mockery. These thorns came to represent how Jesus became a martyr for the sins of his people. The thorn sorcerers in Elden Ring wear a similar crown of thorns on their heads to represent their guilt. Elemer's crimes are also marked by the rusted iron thorns around his body, and Godwyn is described as a martyr to destined death. Taking this a step further, we see that the groups of tarnished being crucified throughout the game have their crimes indicated by a collar of sharpened branches, and the location of the crucifixion of Queen Marika herself is guarded by the thorns of the Erd Tree. It looks like the creators of this game did a good job paying attention in Sunday school. Let's loop back around to the Blood Star. Sorceries almost always scale with intelligence, but the Staff of the Guilty scales with faith instead. This might indicate that the Blood Star is a deity of sorts. This wouldn't be the first time that a star is given life, either. The Elden Beast is described as a star sent to the lands between by the Greater Will, and Estelle, the destroyer of an eternal city, is similarly described as an ill-omened falling star. This term ill omen also happens to be used by the Great Star's weapon description in reference to the blood-stained star. As a final point, I've heard before that we can maybe draw connections between each outer god and a specific star mentioned in-game. While the sun would be associated with the Greater Will, the Blood Star could be tied to the being known as the Formless Mother. The Mother of Truth craves sacrifices of blood, and is loosely tied to thorns with the imagery of roses, drawing a possible parallel. Though, overall, I don't really think there's enough evidence to safely support this conclusion. But what do you think? Am I missing any clues? Do you have any thoughts or findings to add on to this topic of the Briars of Sin and the Blood Star? Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.